I'm Mike Vardy.
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
And this is the Productivityist Podcast. Welcome to the Productivityist Podcast. I am your host, Mike Vardy, and this week on the show, we have Scott Barlow. He is the founder of HappenToYourCareer.com, which I think is fantastic. And we've been trying to get this episode going for a while, and we talk about strengths finding and all that cool stuff. If you're a Patreon supporter, which means if you're listening to this, probably not a Patreon supporter, or if you are, you're listening to the public episode. But in the Patreon episode, I actually go into my own Strengths Finder test. I actually took one. So if you're interested in doing that, head over to patreon.com/productivityist, contribute whatever amount you'd like to, and you'll get access to bonus episodes and enhanced content and all that fun stuff, as well as a ton of perks. So you can head over there and check that out and hear what my Strengths Finder results were. But right now, I want you to listen to the discussion I had with Scott Barlow here on the Productivityist Podcast. Enjoy. I'd like to welcome Scott Barlow to the Productivityist Podcast. Scott, thanks for joining me this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This has been a long time in the making.
It has. I mean, either, and it's been mostly me. It's been mostly me saying, hey, I have to reschedule. And I mean, we met at Podcast Movement.
Yeah.
And you tried Japanese whiskey.
I did for the first time, and it was I became a fan very, very quickly.
So have you been buying Japanese whiskey since?
Only once.
Which one?
Only once.
Which one have you tried?
It was
probably the Nika.
Nika?
Yeah.
Yep. Because we tried that there, and I'm like, oh, that is.
Yeah, Nika's awesome. Really good.
It was
stuff.
Smooth. I was. Oh man, I didn't. First of all, until we started talking, I didn't realize there was good Japanese whiskey out there. Second of all, I didn't realize that the bar that we were standing in actually sold it. And third of all, had no idea it was going to be that smooth.
Yeah, so. It was interesting because it was a side, like they had a secret menu, and they gave it to me, and it was a flight of Japanese whiskeys.
Yeah,
and it was $17 American, which is I think $43 Canadian. But still, that's cheaper. It's cheaper than what it would cost for me up here anyway. And so I bought, I think every night that we went down there for Podcast Movement, I think I bought a couple of flights just to share with people. Because not many people had tried it. And we're in Fort Worth, Texas. So it's not like you're going to be thinking about Japanese whiskey in Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah,
so.
I went there expecting barbecue and, not Japanese whiskey. But I'm sold. So thank you for that.
No problem. And thanks for joining me. And thanks for having me on your show as well. I was on your show a while ago.
Yeah.
And I had a blast. And I thought, well, let's have you on this show to talk about what can happen when you decide to take control of your life and your career, as opposed to letting your career kind of lead you in a place that you don't necessarily want to go. And I think that there was definitely some relational components to productivity here, but you've got the site Happen to Your Career. And it's funny because I've talked to Cal Newport before, who I'm sure have you looked up Cal Newport's stuff before? So Good They Can't Ignore You, Deep Work, phenomenal writer.
Yeah, I don't know Cal, but I know of his work, yes.
And he talks about how you shouldn't pursue your passion, but you should follow, like you should earn career capital and then find the work you love within the career that you've chosen. Do you like when it comes to what you do you kind of follow that theory to a point, or like, because I mean, obviously people, when they're in a career that they're currently pursuing, or being pursued by, I guess is probably.
Yeah.
Do they find like there's obviously some fear and some trepidation to just up and leaving? I mean, I know I came across that. Like, how do you, when you look at this, do you say, hey, you know what, see what you can find within the confines of what you're doing already, and if not, then let's take some steps to move you out by taking the strengths you have and putting you in a better place?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially since there's so much out there. I mean, there's like, follow your passion and the money will happen. And then there's like let's take inventory of what you've already done, and you should just go do that because you're good at it, that sort of thing. And then there's, some stuff that's in between. But we have an even still different philosophy on it, which we have been able to teach to, at this point, thousands of people. And that's pretty cool. And it started for me just in my personal journey, which, I'll tell you a little bit about, but ultimately it comes down to this for us. We take a look at what you have the potential to be great at. So this unique combination of your experiences and predispositions and, nature and nurture and the things that you enjoy. And we call this your signature strengths. And essentially that's just the unique combination of all that stuff that allows you to be better in those areas than almost anybody else. Even if you're not currently there, when developed over time, it allows you to be able to get there, because everybody has that in a variety of different ways. So we look at signature strengths, and then we combine that with what you really actually want in your life. Now, I know that that sounds a little bit like, well, of course, like, why would you do anything else other than what you want in your life? But what we've found in working with virtually anybody by any different success standards or anything else, a lot of people have a lot of hangups for why they don't actually pursue what they really actually want. And so we help people weed through both those things. Very, very simply, what are you great at, and what do you have the potential to be amazing at? And then what do you actually want in your life? And then we help them figure out what is the best route to take to build your career around that, instead of the other way around.
So instead of people kind of feeling through the dark with their passion flashlight kind of leading them along, and then going, hey, this looks like it might be interesting, you're saying, hold on. You're like the guide. You're the one that says, okay, look, you might not be best suited for this because you see the bright shininess of it, but there's much more depth to it. So let's look a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and two things that might make even a little bit more sense around that. One is a while back, it's probably been about 2 years ago or so, but I was sitting with my, at the time, three-year-old little boy Grayson, and we were putting together a puzzle, or, he'd brought out this Mickey Mouse puzzle or whatever it was. And, he's sitting over on the floor and he's like taking all these different pieces, and he was like trying to just like jam these things together. It's the first time he's ever put together a puzzle. So he's doing what most little kids do, and he grabs one random piece, grabs another piece, tries to fit them together. I can see that he's like getting really frustrated, and he's kind of throwing pieces around. It's not really working at all. And that's where I said, okay, look, I got to show you how to do this, because everybody knows, if you've put together a puzzle at all, there's kind of a really efficient way and, what Grayson was doing. So the efficient way is very simply, you find all the corner pieces. Those things are easy to identify. They've got two sides on those corners. And then once you got those corner pieces, you find all of the edge pieces, right?
Yep.
And you've got those edge pieces, and all of a sudden now, when you separated those out, you can actually start to assemble those into a frame. You can kind of see what colors go together. And once you get this frame and it's built out, you can start to see that, oh, well, even though I don't have this whole puzzle together, I can start to see what the picture actually looks like now that I've built this frame. And I can see Mickey Mouse's, foot down here, and Donald Duck's nose, and all this other stuff on there. And that's very, very much the type of system, because then you can actually fill in the picture, and then you can start to do that, take all the rest of those pieces, fill them in very, very efficiently, versus the grabbing and scrambling and cramming together. And most people, what they're doing is they're doing that exact same approach that Grayson was using, where they're like grabbing random pieces out of their life and saying, oh, well, I know that I hate my boss, so I need to go someplace else where I don't hate my boss. And I know that really what I want is I want to be able to, I don't know, attend my child soccer games or something like that instead of working during that time. So I want to, not do that. And that doesn't work very well. They move on to the next thing, or they don't make a change at all, whatever it is, and they continue to be unhappy. So instead, we take those corner pieces, which are just like those signature strengths that I talked about. We help people identify, like I said, what they are great at. And then we help them pair in those edge pieces, which are really what you actually really, truly want in your life, which is we found is very, very difficult for most people to quantify. You think it sounds like it should be an easy question, and maybe it should be, but most of us have the head games and stuff that we work through to be able to make that happen. So, but the funny thing is, when you do that, when you understand what you're great at or have the potential to be great at, and you have the frame built out totally with what you want in your life, you can actually start to see what the picture looks like, just like that puzzle. And most people never, ever, ever get to that point. So they're perpetually confused and perpetually unhappy with what it is that they're doing.
It's funny. As we did the introduction, we talked about how the correlation between productivity and what you do is I use the puzzle analogy all the time when I talk about routines.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So when I'm like, this is a very familiar story because my son does the same. And the thing is what happens. So when I talk about routines in this sense, which are anchors, really, they are really anchors, kind of like those strengths that you're talking about.
Yep.
Is that if you have those in place, the middle part of your day is never going to be the same. You don't quite know what that looks like. So you're going to have to take your time piecing that together. But if you always have the edges ready for you to go, then you framed it already. And I think that's absolutely, that's something that's really, really important for people to kind of understand is that, you need to, if you can set up a framework in place and make things easier for you in that regard, then it's really helpful because, again, you're right. Most people, what they'll do is they see the 8 pieces that happen to be stuck together when they came out of the box. And they're like, oh, let me work with those. Yeah. But that's making it harder for themselves because you're going through the other 100 pieces trying to find them. Whereas if you just find those edges, I think that's really a way to go. Now I haven't talked at all about the podcast or on the podcast before about the Strengths Finder. And you've written a blog post about it, which I'll share in the show notes. But so Strengths Finders are I've gone through the airports and I've seen the book all over the place. What are your thoughts behind the Strengths Finder kind of philosophy and the approach? And then why do you think people maybe when they hear something like that, because I see it and hear it and some people, that seems like it's a lot of work to look in, a lot of introspective work. Like, how do you approach that finding of those strengths?
I guess to give you a little bit of a baseline, with my podcast and with, I guess, working in HR and then working with, I don't know, all different types of executives for companies and entrepreneurs and things like that, I've gotten to see just a wide range of like thousands and thousands of people that are kind of in different places, and some that are successful by their standards and some that are successful by other people's standards, but not their own. And one of the funny things that I've observed, first of all, are the people that are the happiest on the most regular basis are the people that are, in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, the most self-aware. And, I've observed that correlation again and again for a long time before I really understood some of what was behind that. And I think that part of being fully self-aware is you have to understand what your strengths are. And the other massive advantage for that is if you clearly understand what you're great at, it's so much easier to excel in whatever it is that you want to do, because most of the time, in fact, I would say once you dig down 4 or 5 layers deeper for that self-awareness, all of the time, the things that you are the very, very best at are also the things that you enjoy the very most. And they're those things that you can't stop doing that are so innately built into you. So that's a little bit of the precursor to my philosophy, where it overlaps with the Strengths Finder philosophy, which their simple philosophy is, hey, if you're working in your strengths, you're going to do better than anybody else. Like whether you're running a business or you're, getting a job or anything like that, you're going to naturally shine because it's easy for you. So why go against the grain? That's kind of where our stuff intersects with Strengths Finder. And for Strengths Finder, I love it in particular just because it helps shortcut a lot of that introspective work. And in fact, I just had two coaching clients that I talked to earlier before we got on the phone, two separate coaching clients, and I'm just starting work with them in the last few weeks. And I had both of them do Strengths Finder. Like I purchased it for them so that they could go through and do Strengths Finder because it gives them verbiage to their strengths. Mm-hmm. And that's incredibly important. Because so many people find it a struggle to quantify. They're like, I'm really good with people. It's like, well, how are you good with people? What's the context in which you're good with people? What are the type of people that you really enjoy working with the most and are the best at? And why is that? And, dig 4 or 5 layers under the surface. So what I find is that Strengths Finder, when you go through and do the 177 questions, which usually takes about a half an hour or so, and it pops you out on the other end, this very, very, very accurate assessment of it. The top 5 strengths themes is what they call it, that it ranks you with. The most valuable thing out of it is it gives you several paragraphs worth of verbiage about yourself out of that. And that can save as many as 8 or 10 or 20 hours of that that really difficult reflective type work. So just from an efficiency standpoint, I love Strengths Finder. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
No, you know what it does is it actually, I've not done it before. And so what I'm going to do for the Patreon listeners that are listening to this episode, there's the public folks and then there's the Patreon listeners, is because I know we have an abbreviated time schedule here, is that the tail end. So after I'm done talking to Scott, you're going to hear me reveal I'm going to take it. And then I'm going to share with you my 5 themes.
Well, I'm excited about this.
And so I'll share it with you, Scott, as well.
Okay,
so cool. I'll send it to you. But anyone who's a Patreon supporter, and again, this is where I plug, go to patreon.com/productivityist, and that will be the bonus component. So you'll only hear it shared if you're a Patreon supporter or if you're Scott Barlow. Then you'll hear it as well. And probably my wife.
Probably.
Because she will go, okay, so she will say, well, yeah, or duh. And that's probably what will happen. Do you find that's what happens when you start to, when you're working with people in figuring out their signature strengths and then helping them happen to their career instead of, having life happen to them, having them happen to their life. Do you find that the people that they're surrounded by, do you hear from them saying, yeah, you know what? The people that I'm surrounded by are saying, well, yeah, of course, this totally makes sense. Why is this so oblivious to you?
Generally, that's what happens. I would love to say it didn't because I don't know. It's kind of a moment for most people where it's like, well, then why didn't you tell me? Like, this could have been a lot easier if I didn't. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, generally I find that happens. In fact, one of, we don't need to go into it right now or anything like that, but that's one of the things we'll have people do in some of our programs and some of our courses is if we're helping people discover what their strengths are, we've got a whole set of, scripts and assessments and even emails that you can send your friends and family that know you really, really well to help get that type of information out of them so that you can then leverage it and use it. Because a lot of times they already know, because it's easier to see. It's probably easier for me to see your strengths and you to see mine than it is vice versa, like me to see my own, because I those are my blind spots, right? It's easy for me. I take it for granted. And most people assume that what you're great at is something else that everybody else is great at too.
I see this happen a lot, with people I work with as well. But like, now let's talk about priority for a bit, because that's an area that I think that so now that you've got these signature strengths, you understand that it's very easy, and I talk about this a lot with just my work in general, is that you get caught up in the busy work. You get caught up in the minutia, the ought to stuff, the need to do stuff that others have thrown your way instead of the want to do stuff that probably, if you spent more time, not probably, definitely if you spent more time fostering, then you will see a larger impact over time. Yep. How do you help, and how do you, first off, how did you, when you kind of got into the space that you're in now, and then how do you help others kind of say, okay, look, I know what these strengths are now. How do I leverage them, and how do I make sure they don't get lost in the shuffle?
Well, a couple of different ways, but I'll give you one example. So that whole puzzle method that we were talking about, essentially our output from that process is something that we call a decision profile, or what a couple of my customers separately ended up calling, well, that's like your filter. That's like, and what they meant by it was we create essentially a document that provides this objective. It takes all of these like wants and needs and woo-woo to sort of type stuff that's kind of cloudy and fuzzy for most people, and puts it into a very, very objective approach where, it's your strengths and what you want in your life, and it's quantified on there. And so then the way that we end up using that decision profile that I'm talking about is when you are evaluating opportunities, whether it's opportunities for the type of business you're going to start or run, or whether you are starting a new project, or whether you are making a career change, or whether, whatever it is, it applies to all areas of your life, not necessarily just your career, but it helps you be able to go down and say, look, is it going to get me closer to this, what I want in my life? And it essentially creates this checklist almost for you. So I've actually with different clients, and even in one of the, actually two of the programs that we use, one called Side Biz MBA, where we help people start businesses over a 6-month time period, and then another one, and figure out what fits, where we help people decide what type of career or business they should be pursuing. We use that profile with them so they can go down and say, okay, well, I'm looking at starting these 3 types of business, or these are my 3 types of business ideas. How well does it line up with getting me where I want to go in my life? And I mean, we literally have put it on a spreadsheet in a lot of cases, and, percent totaled it and said, wow, this one's like 95%. Oh, this one is only 35%. Okay, well, nix that one off the list, because, it sounds like a great idea, but when I compare it up against what I really actually want, it's not going to move me closer at all, or very, very, very small amounts. So, doing that, it really does act as a filter. Like you put your ideas or opportunities or projects or whatever else, anything that you might be considering, and allows you to be able to filter it to make those decisions on the other end in a very objective way, which is normally for that type of stuff. Like when you're excited about something, it's very emotional normally.
See, for me, I as you're talking about this, I'm immediately thinking about, as you would expect, considering what I've been working on, is I would incorporate, when you figure out what your strengths are, I would turn them into the modes that you want to, or again, they're themes anyways. But I mean, if you want to focus on that, you could theme your days based on those strengths, or you could theme, that might be too broad, because some days you may just not be able to tap into that strength. But if you start to follow the idea of mode-based work on your to-do list, whatever app you're using, and if you're using elements of the kind of the methodology that I teach, you could say, okay, I'm going to tag these tasks with this strength because that's what I need to tap into, or that's what they foster. And then what you can do is, instead of sorting your tasks by the project that you might be working on, or even by a due date, because again, you want to make every day a due date, D-O, date. What you can do is say, I'm going to tap into my this particular strength, and you can see all the tasks that are going to foster that strength. So that way you're in that state of flow, and it strengthens that muscle, right? I mean, when you talk about strength in general, you want to talk about muscles and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that could be a way for those of you who have been using what I teach and have been following what I teach. That could be a mode. Like these strengths could be a mode. They're either a resource-based mode that you call upon, or even an energy-based mode, because if instead of saying I have high energy right now, you could say, okay, well, these are the different types of things I can do when I have my high energy. And then you can have those brain dead tasks that you just tag with brain dead, so that way you can build up that willpower later on. I mean, I love this idea, because what it does is it puts you it puts you in the position you've talked about to happen to your life. Like you aren't waiting for things to happen to you. You are taking action. And I guess like how do you when it comes to taking action, are you a big believer in the idea of scheduling everything, or are you more of the let's schedule the stuff that's date specific, kind of, again, very much along the lines of getting things done methodology? Like these are the things that I need to do because I'm meeting with, like us, we are wrapping up in the next 10 minutes because that's when our appointment ends. So that's universally understood. It's
yeah.
But do you say, okay, you know what, I don't want to hyper schedule myself that way? Or are you somebody that says, hey, look, let's schedule things because if I schedule all this stuff, that I guarantee it's going to get done? How do you work? And then how do you gauge what others will do? Because I know not everybody will work like that.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what we've done, and it's certainly evolved over the years for me. You and I were talking about getting things done method and, some of the good versus shortcomings or type things that we've experienced for us personally. But what I started actually doing when I was running this business on the side is now what I do, but it's evolved over time. So what I started out doing way back when, and this actually came from kind of weird experience, but my wife and I were paying off a bunch of debt. And this has been about 8 years ago at this point or so when we started doing that, 8-9 years ago. So quite a while ago, but we had like 6 figures worth of debt to be able to pay off.
Right.
And we were going through, and on a weekly basis, initially, we were setting out an initial budget, and then we were reviewing that budget. And that turned into like this planning time for us. And, after we got all this debt paid off and we were way, way, way better at budgeting, there really wasn't the need to meet on a weekly basis anymore. I mean, even after the first year or so of doing that. So, that continual routine or whatever you'd like to call it, of us meeting and doing some of the initial planning or prioritizing or combination thereof, turned into later on to kind of fill that void, us meeting on a weekly basis. And at first we were like planning out, we were planning out just what was going to happen during the week. And it became a communication tool for myself and my wife to stay on the same page. And then later on, when I started this business, it became a, okay, we only have so much time, and we're devoting even some what would normally be family time or something like that to be able to get this business off on the ground and running, because I was working a full-time job at the same time doing HR. And from there, it turned into a sort of like your theme days that you talk about, where Saturday is project day, and for 6 hours, from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. And then again from, this time to this time, Saturday is project day. And then, Thursday morning is podcast day. And I ended up, nobody necessarily has to do this, but it worked really well for me. I ended up starting getting up really, really, really early just to find the extra time. But the way that I would allocate that time would be based on here's the priorities during the week, and then here's what the theme days are, and how does it sink into that theme days. And if it doesn't, then we would schedule the stuff that didn't. So we'd have like the regular recurring things where, for me, for a while before I hired somebody to do my podcast editing, like I would do podcast editing each week. And then as I realized that's something there were a lot of other people better at, and I wanted to spend my time in a different way, then that turned into a different theme and a different day, different project, and allocated that to somebody else. Or what ended up happening is we built out our team, then that turned into leading the team time for me. But right now what I actually do is this combination of theme days and scheduling everything out. And if you look at my calendar, it looks really, really, really intense. But really, for the most part, it's just these half-day chunks divided into what are the most important things for my business, right, and most important things for my family. So part of that became we block out time on the calendar to devote towards family time, and then we actually schedule that first. So, we don't even necessarily know what we're doing sometimes, but that becomes sort of our theme day for that thing. So typically Tuesday nights, we just completely block it out week to week. because we're going to do something as a family. And we put that, speaking of being intentional and, I don't know, happening to your life versus your life happening to you and all that sort of thing. We realized that if we didn't put that stuff on the calendar and we weren't intentional about doing that, then something would pop up or something would get scheduled or some, I don't know, friend or family member would ask us to do something on that particular night. And, we'd have 2 weeks go by and we wouldn't have spent any family time.
Yeah.
And we didn't like that when we weren't okay with it. So over time, we realized that we had to use sort of this combination of blocked out time that's for a theme, as you put it, which I've stolen that since you and I talked about it a while ago, just calling it that. And then from there, scheduling whatever is the biggest priority.
So it's a hybrid approach.
It is a hybrid approach. It really, really is.
And I mean, for me, the nice thing is Saturdays are always family day. And the thing about when you theme, which I think a lot of people, if they're trying to transition from scheduling everything or living within a schedule that forces you to do everything within a certain period of time, like you're all meetinged out and stuff like that, what you can do is you can say, okay, you know what? If I theme my day, it gives me an overarching focal point for the day. So even when I have that free time, Chris Gillibo wrote this great post. I'll link to it in the show notes where he talks about, the most productive people don't have free time. Because everything is even if it's not scheduled, they have something that they know they need to be working on at any given time. So whether it's I'm gonna, like last night before bed, I'm doing this new dietary lifestyle program with a local doctor, and one of the things he said to do was to watch Forks Over Knives, the Netflix documentary.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, and so I hadn't done it yet, and I've already started the program, done the blood tests, all that stuff, and now I'm watching I watched the documentary last night, and so that was after I was done all my daily stuff, so there was nothing to schedule. But I looked at my to-do list that I had, and I keep everything there. And I said, oh, you know what? It's now time for I'm going to look at like reading or consuming media or whatever. And actually, when I actually tend to put movies under reading as well, because I try to do both of them with my leisure time a little bit. Yep. And so I actually saw it there. I'm like, oh, because it said watch Forks Over. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I got some time. I'm going to watch it. And I did. And I think that, like, so for Family Day, I do stuff for my family. So that isn't always, let's go to the park, let's play outside. Sometimes it's let's clean the house. Yeah. Let's list stuff. Right now, my daughter and I'm going through, I've just read Joshua Becker's new book, The More of Less, as we're recording this. So I read it before the launch date. Yeah. And he's inspired me to, I've met Joshua on a number of occasions. I don't think he was at podcast. He doesn't do a podcast, but he's been at a lot of events I've been at. World Domination. I haven't met him.
We have a lot of mutual friends I've learned over the last few months, but I don't know him.
He's at the World Domination Summit pretty much every year, and so I saw him there last year. We spoke at an event in January together, and he, his book was coming out, and I said, hey, let's check it out. And I've literally gone through a minimization phase, starting with just the basic areas that he's told me to start with, and now my kids are following suit. So that's something that we'll do on Saturday. My son saw that my daughter is selling a couple of things very intentionally, and he saw that someone came and gave her money for it, and he's like, I want money. And I said, well, you have these toys that you're not using, and you want to go to Toy Fair on May 1st, because we're recording this before the Toy Fair. And and he's like, yeah, I want to buy more Lego. I'm like, well, this is one way you can do it. So it again, if you have these themed days, I know on Saturday, like, that I'll be spending time with him. And I can immediately say, like, when can you do this on Saturday? Because I know it will take time. Whereas if my daughter and I want to sit down, she wants to start doing a YouTube channel because she really is into that stuff. And I want to make sure she does it right.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of things. I mean, I want
her
to learn.
How old's your daughter?
She's 11.
My I want her to learn. Daughter really wants to do that too.
Yeah, so. I want to learn. So I've gone and done some research, and I want her to learn from the mistakes I made initially starting out too. And she's also younger, so there's some other things to consider there. Yep. I can sit down with her tonight and talk about that stuff because it's not going to take. It's not going to necessarily take a lot of time, and I can say, come back to me with this other stuff. But having that Saturday also means I can put things like wash car, go return bottle empties, mow the lawn. And it gives you permission to productively procrastinate, if you want to call it that, or deliberately delay those tasks. Like, we're recording this podcast on a Thursday. I'm not going to touch anything after we're done talking until the following Wednesday, because that's my audio video day. Yeah. So I think that you take control of your schedule, which oddly enough involves creating constraints and having a framework, which seems counterintuitive to people. But really, you and I both know that that's not the case. You need to have that, right?
It's much more freeing. It really, truly is. If you know how you're going to be spending your time, even if it's not to the utmost detail, but you have an idea of how you're going to be spending your time, then it gives you the freedom to go and spend it that way.
Give yourself an inch and you'll take a mile.
Yeah.
Right. If any doubt in, I might take this call at 6 o'clock in the morning instead of 7, because that's when I start. Once you do that once, you've basically disregarded your own boundaries, and you've also opened up the door to other people to do the same. So having that in place is really, really key. Now we're gonna wrap up now because you got to go. But I wanna thank you for joining me, Scott. I really had a great time, and I want to have you back on when we can talk more about. I want you to come on, and what we'll do is we'll do a reactionary episode to my Strengths Finder results.
Sold.
So we could do that,
and
that'll be awesome. And we'll do that a little bit later on, so that way the people who are Patreon supporters get to hear it now, and we may release it to Patreon supporters first, and then to the general public afterwards. But where can people find you? And I know you've got this thing you've been working on called Scribd MBA, so let's get that out there really quickly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So our home base is happentoyourcareer.com, and that's the place where you can find just about anything that you want. Great place to go to that. Find the best stuff for you is just click on the Start Here link, and that'll guide you to the whatever you need, how to get the most out of our site. And you can connect with me there too. And Scribd MBA is it's something that I'm really excited about. And you and I were talking a little bit about it before, but really what we're doing with Scribd MBA, it's for people that want to be able to start a business and don't have tons of small business experience and want to be able to take their business idea and grow it to a profitable business inside 6 months. And we go through a curriculum and a college type format. We pair you up with a very specific group, and it's something that's a lot of fun. It's something that I haven't seen out there. Take really the combination of the best stuff from college and get rid of all the stuff that isn't effective or doesn't work, and combine that and replace that with stuff that really gives you the highest possible chance of being really, 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 really successful in starting a business. So, and the personal attention and support to be able to do it. So that's something I'm super excited about. And you can find more information about that there at scribdmba.com or happentoyourcareer.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much today for joining me, Scott.
Thank you, sir.
Well, there you have it. A great discussion with Scott. You can head over to, just check out the show notes, actually. Head over to happentoyourcareer.com, and you can check out all the stuff that Scott and his company have to offer. I had a great time with him. And again, I can't wait to share Japanese whiskey with him again down the line. That's it for this week's episode of the show. I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. Thanks to John Polster, the podcast producer, for putting things together. And if you are interested in sharing the show, I would love it, because the more people that listen, the more people will find us. And I mean, we were ranked one of the best productivity podcasts by Inc.com. So we're getting more and more listeners. We got more and more guests lined up, and I'd love to get feedback because I want to make the show better. So leave a rating and review in your podcast aggregator or listening apparatus of choice. iTunes is one of the best places to do that because that's where a lot of podcasts are found. So if you're listening through iTunes, I'd love to get a rating and review there. If you're interested, again, in supporting the show in a monetary fashion, head over to patreon.com/productivityist, and you can see everything that you need to do to make that happen there. So until next time, I am your host, Mike Vardy, reminding you to stop guessing and start going.